you confused by metadata? Do you know what a H1 tag is? Well, hopefully by the end of this video, you'll understand a little bit more. Now, I'm going to be really controversial here and say that website optimization is pretty simple and easy to do. Now, I'm going to dispel a few myths. Now, if you're a business owner or if you have a website, you might be a little bit confused about what all the fuss is about with search engine optimization. And this is probably because you spoke to a web developer or an agency and they've probably made it a bit confusing for you because they want to keep hold of the business. Well, today we're going to explain some of the things to do with SEO and try and dispel all of the confusion around it and make it easy for you to understand. Now, as a business, we always work to a very strict and a simple strategy that we build the foundations and then we build on the foundations. Now, a website is pretty much the same concept. The SEO of a website needs to be well structured and have its foundations before you build on it and do additional work to drive traffic to it. Now, Google is, it's a very big and very fast machine that reviews lots of things about your website all the time. So when somebody goes into a search for a product or service that you sell on your website, Google will check your website out and check for some key areas to see what's in those key areas to judge your website and to work out whether it's relevant for the search to come up in the search that the people have just searched for. So this means that within the very basic template of any website, there needs to be some key information in key places. That is the simple part. We've just got to let you know what the meaning is for all those terms and then what needs to be in there. Now, Google looks at a website and tries to build an understanding of the content on it through the position of the words that are within the page and in certain areas. Now, there are probably 6-7 different places that Google looks for that content. Now, the first one is the page title. Now, that's the bit that appears at the top of the browser when you see your web page. The second one will be the H1 tag. H1 is header first, really. So this is the key area, the most important heading on that page, and that's what Google looks at to see what the page is about. Then you've got the URL, which is the bit after your domain name, and that is also key. Then there are things like the content of the page, the text on the page. And then there are things like the images on the page. They also need to be optimized for any search. Now, you need to have, ideally, an image on each page that relates to the keyword and has an alternative line of text that describes the content of that image. So what to put in are all of those key aspects, key spaces on the site. Now, you've probably heard of the phrase keyword. You've probably not necessarily understood exactly what that means. Well, a keyword is what you'd expect a potential customer to put in the search on Google and find your website. So in the ideal situation, when Google looks at the keyword that's been typed in and then compares it to your website, it's looking to see whether those keywords are in the relevant places, those elements that I've just mentioned. So the important part is to look at those key areas and making sure that you've got the keywords that are for the searches. Now, that's the hard bit. The hard bit is coming up with the keywords, because although you probably know everything there is to do with your business, you are not the customer. You are the business owner, and a customer acts differently to you. So you've really got to get inside the head of the consumer, the customer, to work out what those keywords are. But when you work out those keywords, it's important that you include them in all of those areas that I mentioned. So, for example, if we give an example here, if we had a fishing tackle website called wormsandco.co.uk and you were promoting fishing rods. Now, the logic is that you would have a page on that website that was fishing rods, that had content on there all about fishing rods of all sorts. So the page URL, the bit that you put in and type into the browser would be wormsandco.co.uk/fishing rods. You keep it nice and simple, and it would make reference to the content of the page. So once I entered that page, the first thing I would see would be the page title, which would appear at the top of the browser, which would say fishing rods. And those words would be at the beginning of the sentence that you put into the page title. Then as you get further down the page, you would have the H1 tag, the most important header, and that would also have the words fishing rods in there. Within the text on the page, you would have 5 or 6 references to fishing rods, and the content would be about fishing rods. It's an important thing there to note as well that you don't put too many words, fishing rod words, in that text, because Google sees this as keyword stuffing and marks you down as a result of it. Also within that page, you would have an image of fishing rods, which the title, the file name for that image would include fishing rods in it, and the alt text, the text that describes the content of that picture for screen readers or visually impaired, would also include fishing rods in it. Now, the only other thing that I've missed out there, which is an important element, is the meta description. Now, this is the line of text that typically comes underneath your name in a search. So when you see your website in there, if it says worms.co.uk, you would have a sentence underneath that describes what it is that page has referenced. And that naturally would have the words fishing rods in it. In all these instances, there is a balance to be had as to the number of words you include within that text and where the keywords are in relation to the start of the sentence. In the meta description, I typically always try and include those keywords towards the beginning of the sentence because that adds more importance to them. And the same goes for the H1 tag. I'll try and make sure that the keywords are towards the beginning of the sentence, because that's how I see Google or perceive Google to test the page. Now, I'm assuming that most of you who have got this far, you're probably, you're not web developers. You probably have a low knowledge of SEO, and that's why you're still here. Now, I'm also assuming that you've probably got access to a content management system with your website, and you should, with any typical standard content management system nowadays, be able to edit these elements within your website. If you haven't, if you're using something like WordPress, you can add a plugin. There's plenty of plugins that will allow you to add that content in. It's not too technical. Hopefully, if you follow this list and you kind of break down the structure of the pages in that way, then you should be able to follow that and update the content within the pages. What we typically do is we use some of the software that's out there, Moz, for example, that allows us to score the content of the page. We will typically, before we go through this process, we will score the page based against those keywords, and Moz will give you a score out of 100 to see how well you're set up. It will then tell you how many of those elements you've got right, how many of them are wrong, and what you need to do to improve it. We do this, and we call this a benchmark. So we set the base level, we can see what the page was set at, and then we actively change those things, put meta descriptions in, put the H1 tag in a different format structure, make sure the keyword's in there, and then rescore the page to allow us to see how the page is improved. Now, there's no proof that that works, that Moz is scoring the right things, but we believe that sets the base level for how you should have your website, the foundations for your website. Now, the important thing to comment on as well is this isn't the end of it. This is only the foundations. With every website, you need to keep evolving the SEO on it. You need to keep adding new content, more keywords and additional phrases that will link into additional searches. Now, this is important because no doubt your competitors will be updating their website, and Google will be checking the websites to see which is most accurately frequently updated, and therefore judge them better, higher over you. Now, this is a difficult thing. You've got to find additional keywords that you want to build into the website and find ways and strategies to actually add in content that relates to those searches. So if we go back to Worm & Co., it might be that you would add additional pages within that website that will be fishing rods for competitors, or 5-foot folding fishing rods, if that's a thing. And you would add pages that were specific for that content and go through the process again of adding those keywords, 5-foot folding fishing rods, into all of those key places within the website. So that increases the opportunity or the possibility that you will come up in those kind of searches. If somebody was to put into Google 5-foot folding fishing rods, crikey, I should have picked something else there for that. But so that is basically the simple way of doing search engine optimization. If you've got this far, you'll be pleased to know that we're going to put a download in the description with all these information in, so you can be able to download it and use it as a reference point. Hopefully you've enjoyed this episode, and hopefully it will expand and improve your knowledge of search engine optimization. So you're probably asking yourself, how do I make sure that I do this? You'll probably add it to a to-do list. Well, we've got a really, really clever video here all about habits.